Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. We'll be discussing intuitive VDI with scale computing and Leostream. Before we get started, I do want to cover a few reminders. This webinar is being recorded. You'll receive an email in a couple of days with a link to view it on demand. Also, this webinar is interactive, so jump in with your questions using the Q&A widget located under the slides on your screen. We'll get to as many as we can, and if we don't get to your question, we'll be able to follow up with you after today. Also, we have some information in the handout section, so take a look there for some downloads. And lastly, I want to remind everyone we have an attendee chat, so dive in and start a conversation with your fellow IT pros. All right, well, let's get started. Our speakers today are Alan Conboy, Office of the CTO at Scale Computing.
Hi, everybody.
Great, and thank you, Alan. We also have Karen Gondoly, CEO and VP Product Management at Leostream.
Hi, thanks, David.
All right, well, with that, Alan, I'll hand it to you to get started.
Sure, and thanks, David. Appreciate it. And always great to be talking to the Spiceworks crowd. So, Scale Computing and Leostream have joined forces to solve one of the longest running problems in VDI. The fact that historically speaking, VDI was complex, it was expensive, there was a lot of moving parts from a lot of different vendors with a huge supporting cast of additional servers that had to be run to make it even work. It made VDI a security and control play rather than what it really should have been, which was a cost-effective way to implement virtual desktops. So, real quick, let's jump into who Scale is, then we'll jump into who Leostream is and what the solution does together. Now, Scale Computing, we got started all the way back in about 2007 by taking a much closer look at how virtual infrastructure actually should have been done in the first place, and taking a clean sheet of paper approach to what came to be known as hyperconvergence. Now, it wasn't us that came up with the term. You can actually thank an analyst out of Boston for coining the term HCI, or hyperconvergence. He did it specifically to describe HC3 all the way back in 2011. Now, between then and today, we've expanded internationally. We've gone global. Offices around the planet, from Asia-Pac to EMEA and South Africa and all over the Americas. We've gone north of 8,000 systems implemented out there in the world with one of the highest net promoter scores in the industry. Partnered across the board with names you might know: Google, Lenovo, APC, Intel. We're in good company here. Now, I want to point out something. It's not 2010 anymore. The legacy approach to doing virtualization, it doesn't really fit. It hasn't for some time. What Scale set out to do was to create infrastructure, virtual infrastructure, so easy a 12-year-old can do it. Something that's automated, self-healing, self-load balancing, that redefines efficiency, can run on things as small as the Intel NUC or compute card, things the size of a deck of cards, that can run anywhere from the edge to the fog to the core to the cloud and back, that you don't need to be a VCP and a CCNE and a SNIA certified storage engineer to be able to stand up, to be able to make go. But rather a kid straight out of the local community college, still waving around his A+ cert like he's the first human to ever get one, could stand up an HC3 infrastructure in a matter of about 15 minutes without needing much additional training, creating virtual machines, setting up DR, doing live migrations, failovers, failbacks, migrations to and from the cloud, all single click and just built in with no extra cost. And more importantly than that, do it at a price point that starts as low as $7,000. Now, it's on top of that infrastructure that we came to the realization that, look, we're solving half of the cost problem of VDI. But we really, really wanted to find the right partner to make VDI not only affordable, but approachable, to make it make sense for the SMB, for the mid-market, for the distributed enterprise, for the people that most could use an infrastructure like this, but could least afford it. That's how we got connected to the absolute leader in independent connection brokering, Leostream. And rather than me speak to Leostream, I'm going to let Karen introduce herself. Karen?
Hey, thanks, Alan. Yeah, great. So Leostream, our company's been around since 2002, and we've always have focused on remote access. And we used to call it VDI, but now we talk remote access because it means access to anything, any IT asset that you happen to have hosted on your scale infrastructure, or maybe up in the clouds, whether that's a terminal server session or a full desktop, maybe it's just an application. But our goal is to make it easy for you to provide a single portal for users to actually log in and access their connection using whatever display protocol that you want. And I'll kind of talk more in details about what the Leostream platform looks like and what the components are in some slides coming up.
Thanks, Karen. Now, you all know what the legacy virtual infrastructure looked like. Personally, I've always called it the inverted pyramid of doom. That series of servers plus switches plus somebody's SAN plus hypervisor licensing plus somebody else's DR componentry plus a replication of that entity at another site that really required, for successful implementation, a very deep set of pockets and administrative staff that were VCPs and CCNEs and SNIA certified storage engineers. Well, what Scale's done is simple. We created a self-aware, self-healing, self-load balancing architecture that's all-inclusive, includes every single part of the solution done directly on bare metal without the need for virtual SAN appliances or CVMs or any of that silliness. We created what essentially amounts to autonomous HCI that can run anywhere from the smallest of the small out at the edge on the oil platform, in the mom and pop shop, all the way up to large distributed enterprises, 6,000 retail grocery stores throughout Europe at Delhaize, each with a Scale cluster using built-in replication to replicate their workloads back through to a main cluster and on up to GCP. See, Scale also partnered with Google so that our stack runs natively there, and do it in a way that's a single click, run anywhere, and do it at a price point that makes sense for people. Now, it's on top of that infrastructure that Leostream comes into play. Karen, back to you.
Great. All right, perfect. Thanks, Alan. So the second leg of the stool is the Leostream platform. Now, we actually provide 4 components as part of the platform. There's the connection broker, and then the Leostream agent. And then the other 2, which you don't see on this slide, are the Leostream gateway and the Leostream Connect client. Now, I think of the broker and the agent as the 2 core components. The broker provides the login, a logic engine that decides who has access to what IT assets you've hosted on your HC3 cluster based on who the user is and also where they log in from. This notion of location awareness is very unique to the Leostream platform. The agent then is responsible for monitoring the user's remote desktop connection, so things like login and logouts. Now, our latest broker, that has this built-in support for the Scale Computing HC3 platform. Our developers actually worked right alongside the Scale Computing developers to integrate with the Scale Computing APIs so we can inventory all the VMs and templates you already have in your HC3 environment. We can power control them automatically as necessary. And we can even automatically create and delete new VMs based on these master templates you've created. So you can always have the right capacity based on the demands in your environment, and then tear that capacity back down when you're done. Now, this diagram shows a very high-level architecture. The broker itself, it installs on a CentOS or RHEL Linux VM inside of your Scale cluster. And then on any of those VMs you want us to manage, or any templates you want us to use, that's where you install the Leostream agent that you see. From an end user's perspective, they log in using a web browser, thin clients, or the Leostream Connect client. And what the broker does is it takes the user's credentials and authenticates them against Active Directory, or actually even any number of multi-factor authentication systems that we support. And then based on who that user is, we assign the user a policy, which indicates the pool of desktops that the user has access to. Now, a little bit about how the user connection works. When a user requests a connection to a desktop, the broker hands the desktop connection information back to the client device. So if you think in terms of RDP, that might be an RDP file that then goes to the client device and launches the MSPSD executable, so RDP connection. What that means is that basically the display protocol makes a direct connection from the user's client to the desktop. That's that blue line you see at the bottom. So you get nice native performance for whatever protocol you decide to use. Now, I mentioned RDP, but we also support a number of high-performance display protocols like HPRGS or Nectine TGX. So you can actually satisfy a lot of different types of workflows using these different protocols. Now, the other nice thing about that is since the broker doesn't sit in the data path of user's connection, that means not only do you get the performance of the protocol, but the broker doesn't act as a factor in scaling out desktop connections or act as a point of failure in the connection as well. So just looking a little more closely at the two core components I mentioned, the first and foremost, obviously, is the connection broker. It's your single pane of glass for managing users and the IT assets, and then, of course, connecting users to those assets using the display protocol that you decided to use. We do provide a wide range of plan and policy options you'll see in the demo, and these allow you to model just about any VDI workflow you can think of. So sure, we all know the buzzwords of persistent and non-persistent desktops, but we can do every workflow in between and beyond those as well. Just as an example, with the new ability we've recently added to schedule provisioning jobs, you can model classroom workflows. So you can spin up all the student machines before they show up at 9 and then automatically delete all the VMs when the class is over to help you save on the compute. Last point on the connection broker, because it really is the control center of your environment, it knows everything that's going on, and we log it all. That gives you one location where you can retrieve audit-level tracking of who's using what, where they accessed it from, how long did they use it. And that allows you to track asset usage, obviously, but also to plan for capacity in the future. So you know, hey, my system's been maxed out. Maybe it's time to get another scale box from the cluster. The other component from the previous diagram was a Leostream agent. Now, I mentioned it very briefly, but it's a very important little component. It's basically a service that's on your Windows machine, and it monitors the user's remote desktop session. So events like operating system logout and login, session disconnects if the user has gone idle. And then you obviously have the opportunity in the broker to take actions based on those events. So just as an example, maybe when the user's idle for 2 hours, you want to log them out. You know, the user's gone home, forgot to release their machine. You want to automatically log them out so the next user can access that resource. The agent also has a role in the connection broker's provisioning capabilities. So I mentioned we can spin up and tear down machines. And generally what the agent can do, it's a small set of prep type actions. So updating the newly provisioned VM's host name and joining it to the domain, for example. The last point I'll make just quickly is that the agent is also responsible for Leostream's last mile and user experience features, so attaching network printers to the remote VM based on the location of the user's client device, and also allowing you to control USB device pass-through so you can specify which types of devices users can or cannot pass through. So that's where I'll end Leostream. Obviously, you'll see it in the demo, and we can answer more questions there, but for now, I will pass it back to Alan.
Thanks, Karen. So, as Karen mentioned mere moments ago, leg one of the three-legged stool that is VDI is the infrastructure, the virtual infrastructure. In this case, Scale HC3. Leg 2 is the connection broker. It handles everything from authentication, spin up, spin down, machine creation services, lifecycle management. It's what enables golden image management and wraps the logic around VDI from a perspective of who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay? Now the third leg is profile management. That logical separation of, pardon me, that logical separation of end user data and profile from the underlying VDI VM that they're running on. For that, we use Liquidware Labs, the premier name in the space on profile management. Liquidware separates the user profile data, everything that makes that user unique, from the VM itself, containerizes that on a small file server running on the cluster. Every time that user logs in, their profile is mapped directly into the VM they've just been assigned to. When they log out, it's disconnected so that when an update gets applied to a golden image, a template, and you need to roll that out, it automatically gets rolled out by the connection broker. And the next time the user logs in, their persistent data is unaffected. They don't know anything's changed other than they got the latest, greatest set of patches from Microsoft or Red Hat or whomever. Okay? I also did want to mention one thing about the Leostream agent. It's more than just Windows. Okay? Windows, Linux, etc. Now, while we've been talking here, I have had a couple of questions come in, and I'm a big fan of of speaking to them as they come in, okay? So feel free. There's no such thing as interrupting. Joseph, yes, it's every bit as simple and straightforward as VDI in a box was, only much more capable without any of the artificial limits that the other guys wrapped around that platform. And this has been implemented in multiple sites already. As a matter of fact, the handout section of this webinar has case studies waiting for you. Have a look. Does Leostream spin up non-persistent desktops? Yes. As a matter of fact, Scale has a unique ability that we've built into HC3. The ability to create essentially linked clones from templates that take milliseconds to create. When Leostream's connection broker talks directly to our APIs, that's the integration work that we've done together. They reach in, they clone out those template VMs from multiple golden images for multiple pools. They do it in seconds, power them up, ready to go. All right, want to jump back to the presentation real quick, then we'll get back to answering some more questions, okay? Now, let's do this. Enough talking about it. Let me show it to you. Now, you guys should be seeing a basic 3-node HC3 cluster. Node 1, Node 2, Node 3. Unlike legacy approaches to virtualization, there is no vCenter server or System Center Virtual Machine Manager or any of those third baseman management servers. We don't need one. Point a browser at the IP of any node in the cluster. They talk directly to each other. Self-heal, self-load balance. We actually borrowed a concept from the high-performance computing space called state machines that allow every node to know everything going on every other node in real time, okay? There is no need for the extra supporting cast that the legacy approach to virtualization brought to the table. Now, it's on top of this infrastructure, and to give you some context, this little basic 3-node hybrid SSD and spinner cluster, entry level, for a 3-node, we ship at an MSRP of around 25 grand, all in, no licensing costs, we don't need them, okay? Now, it's on top of this that we have partnered with Leostream to create the integration that allows that connection broker to talk directly to HC3. As a matter of fact, right down here, that small CentOS VM that Karen mentioned, that is the connection broker. It installs with a single curl command. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Bring it up online and point a browser at it. Looks just like this. Log in. Helps if you actually type the right credentials. And welcome to your shiny new VDI environment. It really is probably the single simplest, most straightforward configuration you'll run through. Right here's your downloads. This is where you get the agent. This is where you get the connect. The connect piece is for Windows endpoint devices that you may have in the environment that you wish to repurpose as endpoints. It's what enables that endpoint to talk directly to the connection broker through the authentication channels, the multi-factor authentication, the whole bit. The agents that you would drop into the golden master images for the virtual infrastructures that you want to stand up, the VDI infrastructures, along with all your documentation. Setup couldn't be simpler. Go to setup, first thing you do, give it the information for your DC. Okay? Reaches in, connects, give it credentials for something that can add machines to, remove machines from Active Directory. Okay? Drop down to centers. Now, centers in a Leostream world are essentially the infrastructure on which the virtual machines will run. In this case, HC3. As a matter of fact, this specific HC3 cluster. Literally no more complex. Give it an IP, give it credentials, how often for it to inventory, and give it a name. Done. It's now talking to that scale cluster. Gateways, you know, Karen can probably speak to what gateways are better than I can, but essentially it's a pathway for external users out in the world to be able to map those VDI applications or desktops, etc., externally out to endpoint devices of whatever type. Again, just a simple VM that runs on the HC3 cluster. From there, we'll drop down into configurations. Pools. Maybe you've got a VDI instance that you want to put together for the folks in accounting, maybe another one that you want to put together for doctors if you're a hospital, so on and so forth. You simply create pools. Really no more complex than giving the pool a name. Which a subset of which pool you want it to be, if any. Okay. How you want the names for those VMs that Leostream creates on your scale cluster for you. How you want them to be named. Which protocols to use, whether or not to join them to a domain. How you want the naming to work, and whether or not to enable creation services like provisioning. For example, let's say that really I want 15 here and stop creating at 20. And the second I hit apply on that, you'll see that broker automatically create those extra desktops right on the scale cluster. Which center to create them in? Remember, centers are your infrastructure. In this case, HC3. Okay. The names you want it to give, where to start the sequence, and more importantly, they know where to look on your scale cluster for your golden master images and can change on the fly which one you want it to use. I may take the template that's this Leo 9 template, clone it with a single click on the HC3 side, apply the latest, greatest Windows updates to it, everything worked great. I jump in here and say, no, now use that one. Couldn't be simpler. Really, really couldn't. It's saving them done. And as a matter of fact, over here on our HC3 cluster, look what's already happening. Those extra desktops that we just told it, no, we want a few more, it's already running them out for us. Now, there's a whole lot more features to the Leostream side of things. Which protocols to use, where, when, why, and how, with which endpoint devices. Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but Leostream supports 12 or 13 different protocols. Everything from RDP, RemoteFX, all the way out to Teradici's PCOIP and everywhere in between, including HTML5. And yes, you can open sessions straight from here into user desktops, etc. power plans, how often to spin VMs up, spin them down, that sort of thing. Much like Karen mentioned mere moments ago, what to do with users when they disconnect, when to force log them out, whether or not to delete the desktop when you've logged them out and create a new one, etc. It's all right here, right at the tips of your fingers, broken out by pools and functional groups for you. Now, one of the hardest things about VDI, especially in distributed environments, was getting them, the VDI instances to map to the right printer. Man, they've even made that simple too. What to map where, when, why, and how based on location. It's right there. Which policies to use, the ability to define different locations for where users are coming from, you name it. Karen, was there anything you wanted to touch on while we're looking at Leostream running actively on HC3?
No, I think that was great. I think you covered a lot of the flexibility, and as you pointed out in the release plans, those notifications, that's the information that's coming in from the Leostream agent. So that's why the communication between the broker and that component on your desktops is so important. And then the other thing, you mentioned the HTML5, and I should mention that that's included in the Leostream gateway. So that, in addition to the remote access, so users who log in from a coffee shop and you wanted them to be able to work from your data center, you can use the Leostream gateway to tunnel their traffic, and that supports some of the high performance protocols like RGS, but it also supports the clientless access, so the HTML5-based RDP, VNC, and also even SSH. So, Ellen, I know you mentioned that we do support Linux. That's both on the remote side and on the client side. You have a Java component for the agent that's good for Linux. And so if you have developers who like to just have a terminal and SSH into it, that you can actually provide that SSH connection through the gateway as well.
Absolutely. You know, I might even add, and just before I jump into the client side of this, I might even add that, you know, things like your WISE terminals out there in the world, they've natively been supported by Leostream for forever. It's a simple config setting on the WISE terminal to have it automatically just talk to the gateway, talk to the connection broker. Couldn't be simpler. For your Windows boxes, that Leostream Connect application, it's just a local application that you install. You can even configure it to be the default when the system boots. Looks just like this. And the second I hit enter, that pipes itself right on through, talks to the connection broker, and gets piped right straight through to a VDI instance running on the cluster. Just like that.
And Alan, what you might want to show now is the system log page in the broker, because then you'll be able to show how the broker is actually even capturing all these events that are going on, and the Leostream agent is noticing them for you.
Sure, I'll be happy to. Everything gets logged. That was one of the things Karen mentioned right out of the gate. You want the single authoritative source for who's doing what to who for how many cookies, so to speak. It's all right there. Okay? Couldn't be simpler. Job queue, what's been done for what, when, where, why, and how. Everything that's going on throughout the chain, all in one spot. Okay? Now, I think that frees up some time here for questions. Were there other questions that we have here? It looks like we've had quite a few come in. T. Roberts, some call him Tim. Well, you're the enchanter, so we'll trust you on that one. For an SMB with around 200 PCs distributed up and down the East Coast, would it be cost-effective to deploy VDIs in a mostly MS Office-based users? Absolutely. You see, scale, we handle the infrastructure costs, and we've made it incredibly cost-effective. As a matter of fact, for something simple like 100 users, a simple base 3-node cluster, flash, hybrid, mixed, right? Starting at 25 grand. Maybe upgrade it a little bit, add more proc, more RAM, etc. Still under 30 grand. For that same 100 users, the Leostream licensing cost for the connection broker, okay? Even adding in persistent to make those desktops persistent, you're still under 50 grand total spend. That should give you some frame of reference. Now, Dave Gunther, works with Windows Embedded 7 Thin Client. Karen?
Yep. Yeah. No, that's you definitely can do that. You would install our Leostream Connect client on the Windows 7 client, and then you can use Leostream Connect to do the desktop connection just like that. And I also noticed there's another question from Dave asking if it replaces the Windows Remote Desktop Manager. And you can definitely use it as a replacement for that. And one of the interesting things, I've had this conversation about the Windows Remote Desktop Manager with somebody else, and it shows you all the list of the machines you have, and you can RDP to them. But the nice thing in using Leostream is you see all the machines, but you also see who's already using them. So you have more knowledge about what's going on in your system, and you won't accidentally try to log into something that someone else has access to or is assigned to, because Leostream tracks those types of things.
Okay. Looks like we've got questions coming in left and right here. Karen, looks like they're asking about how is sound handled.
So sound is display protocol specific. So our RDP passes the audio back, and then our GS and PC over IP, they all have ways of handling that. So since Leostream isn't in the data path of the display protocol data, however the protocol handles the sound, the performance, and the way it's going to work. Okay.
Okay, let's see what else do we have here, since questions are coming in faster than we can answer them here. Let's see, Jeff, we did answer your question, I hope, about non-persistent desktops. Yes, it's very simple and straightforward. If you're not doing persistent desktops, you don't need the third-party profile manager. So just Scale plus Leostream, and you're there. Okay. As you just saw, it spins them up, and I can simply go into my my plan for a given pool and tell it, okay, as soon as the user logs out, delete it, spin up another one to replace it. Perfect for libraries, kiosks, any of those kind of implementations. Let's see. External access to a desktop for our users. Dave was asking about that. Go ahead.
You want me to take that one, Alan?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so Dave, that's a perfect use case for our Leostream gateway. So the gateway, as Alan mentioned, it sits on a separate Linux box, and you want to put it like in your DMZ or some other location where the user's clients can access it externally, but then the gateway also has internal access to your desktops. And then so what the gateway does is two things, actually three. One, it forwards the login traffic. So your broker's sitting in your data center, and when the user who's at the coffee shop or at home points a web browser or any Leostream client to the gateway then forwards the login traffic to the broker, so the broker can assign out the appropriate desktop. Then when the user requests the connection to the machine, there's two things you can do there. You can use our HTML5 option that's part of the gateway to connect the user into the external user into their desktop. But then you can also use any of a number of client-based protocols that we support. And by a client-based protocol, I mean you actually have to install a software client for the display protocol. So I mentioned MSPSC for RDP or the HPRDS receiver for RGS. So we can tunnel some of that traffic through the gateway as well. So the gateway is the key to your external user access.
Okay. Looks like we've got a couple of other questions here. I'm going to take Jeff New 1213. What is your recommendation for layering apps? Application layering, application streaming. Our partner Liquidware Labs also has an offering in addition to Profile Unity that is specifically built for application streaming, application layering. It's very, very cost effective. And here over the course of the coming weeks, we will be doing a joint webinar with them as well so that you can see those things in action. In the meantime, if you'd like to see them in action, reach out to us. We'll facilitate that for you. Okay? See, Joseph, you had another question about vGPU options available for Scale. It's in engineering right now. Okay? Expect to see something on that in relatively short order. Karen, one for you. Does Leostream support shared session host, i.e. Windows Server Desktop configurations in addition to pure VDI?
We do indeed. So you can manage them all from within the same broker. And those Windows shared desktop hosts, we can do that whether it's Windows or Linux. To us, we call it a multi-user center. So it's another center type. And you would just tell us how many concurrent sessions do you want to have hosted on that server, and then we can manage those out appropriately for users. And if I could just, hopefully that answers that question. Then I want to back up real quickly to the vGPU question. Just to say from a Leostream perspective, after the virtual GPUs are available in scale, we have support for a number of different, I call them the high-performance display protocols, but they're the protocols that are actually capable of leveraging the virtual GPUs to improve the performance of your display. So once that's there, you can pick your favorite display protocol and you'll be off and running.
Okay, outstanding. Can clients connect to VDI VMs that are in a private NATed network? Well, that's kind of the purpose of the gateway, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say that's another good use case for the gateway.
Okay, so your answer to that is an unqualified, yup, you betcha. Now, let's see here. Comparing a Citrix server with many users versus VDI instance of a workstation, how do you compare your hardware needs? How much memory CPU needed per instance if you're going to run this on a virtual server like VMware or Hyper-V? So that is highly, highly individual site specific. It depends almost entirely on what the specific workloads you're looking to run are. That's what's going to define your infrastructure requirements, which is more or less what you're asking there, I think. Now, part of the story of scale is we've redefined efficiency in the space. Now, to compare to some of the other folks that came along after us that joined the hyperconverged naming convention, collectively they run things known as CVMs or VSAs, control virtual machines, on every node in their architecture. And their data paths run all data every time you want to change a period to a comma, if you will, through that VM. Pardon me. As a matter of fact, if you look at those data paths, you're looking anywhere between 12 and 16 hops for every single data change operation. With scale, it's 3 hops, and we don't need CVMs. We don't use them. That notion with HCI that 20 to 40% of your resources just go into running the infrastructure itself doesn't exist with scale. As a matter of fact, compared to competitive offerings in the hyperconverged space, I can run entire SMB to mid-market data centers on the resources those guys require just to boot themselves up. It's a bit of an apples to mangoes comparison there. But what we'll be happy to do is size the environment for you. Okay? Take a look at what your workloads are. Take a look at what your needs are. Size a scale cluster to match what those needs really are. And then one additional thing about scale you should probably know. We solved the Moore's Law problem 7-8 years ago. We have the unique ability to mix and match in the cluster, not just across different types of nodes, but across full generations. In a single cluster, maybe you started with scale 8-9 years ago, you might have nodes that had Xeon X3450 quad-core procs sitting right next to nodes that have Sandy Bridge E5 2660 V3s, right next to 2640 V4s, right next to gold class processors in the Purley lines. They all mix, match, live migrate happily between them. That's a fundamental baseline with scale. What you add to your cluster does not have to match in any way what you've already got in there. I know that's kind of a long-winded answer for what you were looking for there, but I think that gives you some idea. Jeff also has a question about, can he publish individual apps, like from an RDSH host, alongside full desktops? Karen, I think that's for you.
Yep. Yeah, and that's definitely possible. So what we've seen most in our users' environments is remote apps. So you can configure and in this case, what you would do to go into a little bit of the nitty-gritty is you'd have a multi-user center for your RDS host, and then through the protocol plans, you can actually set it up so that it launches a particular remote app session. And so now what you're actually doing is offering out applications to users and connecting them that way.
Okay. So we have a very interesting question here from John 2350. Can we kill a node right now? Matter of fact, I can. And let's have a little fun here. I'm going to walk over to the back of this cluster we're playing with. I'm going to grab both of the hot swap power supplies, both the power cables running to it, and rip them out unceremoniously. Over the course of the next 3 minutes, you'll see the state machines on the other nodes determine that that node has failed, evict him from the cluster, automatically move the workloads that have been running on him, load balanced onto the other nodes in the cluster. Workloads, desktops, etc., running on those other nodes stay up, running, connected, unaffected by the fact that you just took a double-double drive fault in this case, and 30% of your resources just went away. That's the advantage of scale. That's happening in real time as we speak. Just watch. Timer's expired. It lets us know that, hey, node's gone south. You'll see it, that inherent high availability and fault tolerance happen in real time. So let's see, what other questions do we have out here? How big is the data stream? Citrix is about 52K or less for a session. How big is a session for Leostream?
So here, I'm assuming that we're talking about the actual, is this a bandwidth requirement for the, in case of Citrix, it's HDX. Now, as I mentioned for Leostream, we don't provide the protocol, we leverage all the different protocols that are out there. So RDP, VNC, RGS, TGX, the list goes on. And in each of those protocols have different requirements, and we've seen them used more frequently in different scenarios. So, for example, we see TGX a lot in oil and gas applications. We see PC over IP more in media and entertainment. And likely that is because some of them handle lower bandwidth networks and other things like that. So the best thing to do is to think about the different types of workflows that you need to satisfy and the different types of applications your users are running and how graphic intense they are, and then test out the different protocols that we support to see how they work on your network. Now, if this was a question that wasn't related to protocols, then please correct me on the question, and I'm happy to answer something else.
Okay. On the Scale server interface, is there any plans for tools such as Bandwidth Analyzer? Well, we do a lot of that with our partner ecosystem right now, but we are in fact planning on expanding the data that you can see over the course of the coming year. We already have all of the back-end data available in our APIs and engines, but we're working on ways to, like you find with everything else with Scale, make it easy and approachable by anybody, okay? Yeah, people think that it's hyperbole, but it's not when I say that a Scale cluster can be managed by just about anybody. There's literally videos out there on YouTube of a 4-year-old little girl standing up an HC3 cluster, creating virtual machines, doing live migrations, and setting up DR. It's that simple. And John 2350, in real time, you're watching that node 3 go offline, and all of those desktops come right back up online on the other nodes. We're about 3/4 of the way through that process right now. Can you have different admin roles? Okay. There's different levels of control in HC3. Okay. As a matter of fact, right here in user management, okay, you have the ability to specify who gets to do what. There's your read-only, your full admin, customized, which users are allowed to do what, where, when, why, and how. Okay? All of that level of control stuff, again, just built in.
Well, and also I can add that the same is true from the Leostream side. There's a concept called roles in Leostream that can toggle off different pages and even different functionality on the pages of that administrator web interface that Alan was stepping through. So you can create desktop admins who just have permission to reboot machines, for example. So you have pretty finely tuned control in that interface as well.
Okay. So Dim Forrest has a fun question. When you do this, have you ever pulled the wrong cable and taken the webinar down? No. As a matter of fact, I haven't. The worst thing I've ever done is pulled the cable for the node that I was pointing a browser at. That's it. And all I had to do there was point the browser at the next node over. All roads lead to Roam with Scale. It doesn't matter which node you point the user interface to. Okay? Through those state machines, all the data is available through any of them. Okay? Let's see here. A Murphy 2 has a follow-on question for you, Karen. It was a bandwidth question to see how big your remote site connections need to be to support VDI over remote data links.
Yeah, so again, that's going to be protocol independent. The broker traffic itself, the login and all of that, that's just over HTTPS. That's all lightweight traffic. So the big connection is when the user's actually connected to their desktop and, watching a video or something like that. So that's all going to be very protocol dependent.
Okay. Well, I think that gets us to all of the questions that were out there. Anybody else have any questions at all? We're happy to take them, answer them. We'll take them out of band. If you wish to reach out direct to either Leostream or Scale, we'll be more than happy to take some time out of our day and answer our questions for you. And by the way, there you go in the background, completely recovered without anybody having to do anything, infrastructure full up, running, doing its thing, and no users really impacted. There you go. What is the security of external connections for users? Karen, I think that kind of comes back to your multi-factor authentication support.
Yeah, so we do provide a number of different ways. So there's different things you can talk about when you talk about security. And one is obviously first, does my user get access? And that is controlled through who can actually log in through the connection broker. So you can, obviously we do username, password, but you can we integrate with any kind of SAML-based IVP for multi-factor authentication. We can talk with Radius servers if you want to do RSA tokens. We actually just added support for push notifications from Duo Security. So there's a number of different ways to secure the access. And then obviously anyone who Leostream doesn't authenticate successfully, we won't let them in and allow them to connect things. And then there's security on the actual connection itself, and there's where you're looking at how the display protocol handles encrypting traffic and things like that.
Okay. And one last question here we have time for. N8V Texan, is there next day shipping on failed nodes? Absolutely. No question, full stop. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, we have a range of different node types and families that can custom tailor very Lego bricks meets data center style specifically to your needs, ranging from all flash nodes, hybrid nodes. I even have customers using this solution in libraries with very low IOPS requirements, non-persistent desktops, using all spinners. And the neat part is they can all play and live together in the same cluster. Okay? Well, I think that probably brings us to the end of it, David.
Yes, I do think that's it. And again, if you submitted a question and it didn't get addressed, we will have a chance to follow up with you after today. So I do want to extend our thanks to Alan and Karen. Thank you for taking us through that great demo and presentation. We appreciate your time today. I do want to remind everyone that you can view this webinar on demand after we're done today. Look for that link. It'll be sent out to you if you've attended. Also, I do want to extend our thanks to Scale and to Leostream for sponsoring this great event. We want to look forward to seeing everyone for our next partner webinar. Until then, take care all.